Okay, so let's move on to EVs and specifically NIO, because today or yesterday NIO announced that they're cutting 10% of their workforce. Now, this may be an interesting conversation because I know you actually own a NIO, Harold, and
Yes.
I I was at their factory in Hefei just a week ago. So
So we
I
just
think this
found out when we discussed today, let's maybe share with our viewers. So Lee
yeah.
didn't know that I actually own a NIO. I haven't had it for that long, maybe 2 months. It's
Mhm.
a quite new model, and I'll talk more about it. But just like I really love it. It's a really cool car. So for now, just that. But we'll talk more.
Yeah. So you know, they've announced that they're going to cut 10% of their workforce at the end of 2022, which is the numbers that are available. They employed 7,000 people. Now, I'm not sure where all those people are because certainly the factory, there's not a lot of people there. Their production line is fairly highly automated. I actually shot a video. We were not allowed to film in the factory itself. But for the video, I pulled some footage from actually a video NIO had shot themselves. But I can tell you, I actually went around the factory and it is pretty automated. It was quite a surprise to me just how few people are actually in the factory itself. So I would imagine a bulk of those people must be in non-manufacturing roles, I guess. Maybe procurement or marketing or something like that, because there sure was not that many in that particular factory. So that's the first thing. And I was speaking to the marketing woman there, and she kind of explained to me that NIO are trying to be like a lifestyle brand as opposed to just a car brand. And I often think whether that is maybe one of their mistakes, is I think they've come under a lot of criticism for spending on things that are not part of the core, i.e. they've spent a lot of money on developing a phone, you know, and that market is like super competitive. You know, even some of the big players who've done that for years, the margins are like wafer thin. And then the other thing, and if you put the photo up of the NIO house, Vicky, they also have like a sort of chain of these like chill out areas. No, not that one, the NIO house. Yeah, they have a chain of these like places where you can go to chill out, and it must cost a fair bit of money to run and operate those places. And again, I feel that, you know, is it really necessary? But as a NIO owner,
Yeah.
I'd be interested to know what you think, Harold.
Yeah, I just want to jump in because maybe also another background that I have. I did work for 6 years at Volkswagen as
Ah.
first consultant and internally in Volkswagen. And one part of that work was with the R&D department to do market research on how the Chinese market develops. It was a very interesting period from
Mm.
2014 to 19, 20, around that. And in that period, it was really the shift towards electric vehicles, while at the same time, uh, automated driving, self-driving cars became more and more a topic that wasn't just science fiction, but that became like really seriously discussed. Like, will it come? When will it come? In what way will it come? And so from that, I have really some insights to share on this. And I think NIO is doing the right thing, but they may not do it at the right sequence or with the right speed. Because what will happen at one day, you will have the robot taxi, which are completely self-driving cars
Mhm.
that are electric. They can pick you up for the ride that you want to take. They let you off, and when they're empty, they will recharge. They go themselves to a charging station. They recharge. Once they're charged, they go back on the road, and whoever calls them will be driven. So if you know, like Uber or in China Didi, that's the tech to hail the cars, and then they're self-driving. You don't even need drivers inside them. And once that happens, shared driving will become so cheap and ubiquitous and convenient that a lot of people will not buy a car.
Mhm.
It's not, the WFEF vision that you own nothing and be happy, but more like that you don't need to own a car because it's just so convenient without. And only very few people who really are big car fans or just have too much money, they will still buy cars just as a status symbol or as a hobby. And in that situation, the cars will become almost like a commodity. It doesn't really matter in which brand hardware you're sitting. So the question is, for car brands, what will they be producing then? What will they be offering to consumers? And that's where NIO is going. So they have this lifestyle, this community, they have an app, they have now the cell phones. As you've seen in the picture before, maybe from the NIO space, I took that picture today because I just went there, and it's a really nice space. I have to say, in China, one of the most expensive things is space because you have such high population density. So the difference between a cheap and an expensive restaurant is often not even the food quality. Cheap restaurants can have really good food in China, but the expensive place is the one that's quiet, where you have a nice big table separated from the other people, and that's what's expensive. And so NIO Space is a space where only car owners and their families can go in. And it's a coffee shop kind of place, a high quality coffee shop. It also has for little children, it has like a little playground where they have hired some like kindergarten teachers that take care of your child. So if you go shopping, you can bring your child there for an hour or two. You do your shopping and you pick your child up again. And that's all for free. That's all offered. The only thing you pay for is coffee or like drinks. And so it's an offer to really create this brand loyalty that I think makes sense, but they need to become a big car company first. So that's definitely a challenge. And when you ask about the employees, maybe that's another important point. Definitely they have like 4 or 5 people at each of these places. So if they have 100 places, that's already 500 people there. You have the sales staff that's there, the test drive staff that takes you on test drives. So that's easily a few thousand people already. In terms of workforce, it's actually not a big workforce. Like if we think of big car brands like Volkswagen, they have more than 100,000 people. So these are really huge companies. And they need to see where they're going with this, because also the big car brands can and could automate a lot more than they're doing. And they have very strong workers' unions, so it's very difficult for them to reduce staff. And in the long run, there's a lot of potential for these newcomer brands. But as we see now, they need to be very careful in terms of how to manage their cash flow, how to grow, how to finance the growth without too much debt, how to get enough investment coming in. It's a tricky path, but I see huge potential for a NIO brand, definitely.
Yeah, I'm not convinced. I mean, I at the factory they have quite a large showroom. I totally get what you're talking about creating a lifestyle brand and the robo taxis, because that's already starting to happen in some areas now in China. But I just look so. We're at the factory and they have a huge showroom as part of the factory. And I was walking around and I think it's the ES8, which is their largest vehicle. Now that starts at like 500,000 RMB and it goes up to about 650,000 RMB depending on how you have it specified. But then I look at like the Huawei, who is slightly different the way they do it, because Huawei work on the technology and they partner up with other vehicle manufacturers who manufacture the car. So Huawei are not actually working on the car, they're working on the technology. But they've just released the M7, and I would say from a specification point of view, it's not that much different to NIO's top of the line. But that comes in at like 250,000 RMB. That's a significantly, that's a 250,000 RMB cheaper for a very similar car. Now I haven't compared them, spec for spec, but from a casual car buyer, I look around the M7, I look around the top end NIO, and there doesn't appear a huge amount of difference, both with the technology or the specifications and the finish of the car. And it was quite interesting, that a nugget of information I picked up when I was at the NIO factory. Next year they plan on launching a sub-brand of cars which is significantly cheaper to compete in that segment of the market. Because I mean, if you look at the EV industry, I think NIO sales are quite low compared. I think they're sort of near competitors of like Xiaopeng and Li Auto. Li Auto is a bit unfair because most of their sales are hybrid. They're not pure EV. But then you look at somebody like BYD, and they're like massively ahead of, you know, anybody else is like nowhere near them. And I just wonder whether it's the smartest move for NIO to try and compete in an even more, because like the lower priced ones, you know, like the sort of 100,000 to 150,000 RMB, that market is like way more competitive than the higher end. And I think, you know, are they, you know, diverting their attention yet again to try and bring out a sub-brand? You know, I'm really not sure if that sort of is the way to go for them.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things in that, and we're getting into like business strategy now, if you want to argue about these, and there's pros and cons to everything. I think what's very important to say, maybe first I want to start with the M7, Aito M7. I don't think that's comparable to the ES8, because ES8 is a 6 or 7 seater. I think that's the main specification of that car, is that it's big. It's for families with either with a help for the children, or with like a third generation, like 3 generation families.
But the Aito M7 is also a 6 seater, right?
I thought it's a 5. Okay, I'm not an expert. I just looked at some pictures that
maybe somebody watching can just confirm that, because I think it is a 6-seater.
Okay, all right.
I think.
But what I want to say, I mean, what I want to say is the point of luxury cars is that they need to have a strong brand, and you know, like 20, 30 years ago, a Mercedes, an Audi was really more reliable, had more comfort than a VW or a Skoda, or you know, like a cheaper brand. Nowadays, technically, they're all very reliable. They're all safe. They're all comfortable. They have, you know, some details. The thicker glass makes them more quiet. You know, some gadgets that they add in. And again, Volkswagen is this brand that has all the lines. It goes from Bentley, super luxury, like $1 million for one car, US dollar for one car, down to a Skoda that is a rather low cost car. And they on purpose do not put some of the tech in the cheaper cars in order to keep the value for their higher end brands. But technically it's, you know, like, it's a question, does it make sense? Because if you put it in all your cars, then you can scale it more, and scaling again makes things cheaper in production as well. So this is really strategically a very, very tricky question, how you roll out your technology from the high-end brands to the lower ones. And it may be the idea of NIO, a huge cost for car companies, always the R&D to develop the tech. And by having a lower cost brand, you can reuse the tech that you developed already maybe 2 or 3 years back, and now you use it in cheaper brand, whereas the newest tech you put in your high-end brand. These are some thoughts that they may have. Like, I'm not, you know, I'm not consulting NIO, so I don't know what exactly they're thinking. I'm not also saying that necessarily their strategy will succeed. What I'm sure, of course, Aito, with the Huawei partnership, they have a huge competitive edge that they can work with Huawei, which really is an extremely successful high-tech company. BYD, on the other hand, they just have a long history. They're the first electric car maker in China, so they have a really long experience in making electric cars, and they have really beautiful cars too. Like,
with BYD, though, a lot of their sort of lower-end models don't have that much technology is sort of
Exactly.
under 150 or 200 RMB. They don't have a lot of tech. I was very impressed.
Right.
I haven't experienced the full tech in their high-end Neos, but certainly in the M7, I was seriously impressed with the technology they have
Right.
in that. It's really good. But like you say, they have
Yeah, when
this
you make it
massive
to
edge.
Shanghai, I'll give you a test ride.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah, I'm
No,
actually in
another
Shanghai
thing.
on Tuesday.
All right. Now,
Yeah,
another thing is the tech, like Huawei, they definitely can do software. They have the sensors. That's where they're very strong. But will they be able to produce really the hardware of a car? And I have to, like, I think Ito is not actually really the Huawei car. So Huawei denies to be Ito. Ito always emphasizes that they work with Huawei. So it's
that's
kind of a
right. Yeah.
communications struggle between the two companies. They're kind of friends with benefits and enemies at the frenemies with benefits.
Yeah, I think Huawei
But
concentrate on the tech, and the other
right,
company
and will the
concentrate on the
hardware,
car.
you know, do they get the basics done? They may. The same with Tesla. I remember 10 years ago, the German engineers in Audi, Volkswagen, they looked down on Tesla. They said, yeah, they can produce a few
Yeah.
cars, you know, but once they scale up to 100,000, then the quality control will come in, and there will be challenges that they're
Yeah.
not able to handle. Half true. Tesla has since had some horrible accidents where people died because the autopilot didn't work, etc. On the other hand, Tesla is now selling large quantities of cars, so they could scale up. So we'll have to see which one. In total, like in the big picture, I'll say some of the electric car brands in China will fail, will just not be able to
Yeah.
make it independently. But what probably will happen then, they will get bought either by non-Chinese brands or by Chinese state-owned brands, which still have the size, they have the cash, but they're just technically not up to speed anymore. There's several candidates I can think of. They may just acquire one of these new brands that don't have the finances, or
Sure. Yeah.
even, like asset management companies that are there to stabilize the economy and to do like long-term investment. They say this car has potential, it's a good car. It didn't finance well, so they're now bankrupt, but we'll refinance them and ensure that the tech team can continue to build this kind of cars. What I also will say is the challenge for German and American car brands is huge. I think the
Oh, it's
Japanese are,
massive. It's massive. I
they're a
mean,
bit more
I've
adapted. They're also closer to China, but the Germans, phew, and not to mention French and
Well, I think
Italians.
we're already seeing this now. I mean, we've seen recently Volkswagen have bought a stake in Xiaopeng to use their chassis. Because if you actually look at the technology that European have got, they're some years behind where China are, and China actually, it's very difficult for them to catch up, because one of the key components in these EVs is battery technology, and China are way ahead on that. And you mentioned in the conversation earlier about the way Chinese can scale. They have some battery plants that are like, it'll take years for the West to catch up with those, because China companies own the whole supply chain from the mine to the finished product. And,
Right,
you
the
see
rare
it now.
earth.
I think what's the big European company that have just done a deal with one big battery company here, or a car company here? Stellantis have just done a deal with a company here to get the technology. We've seen Volkswagen do a deal. I'm pretty sure that very soon, and I suspect it might be a BMW or a Mercedes may buy a stake in NIO to get their technology, because NIO do have some good technology, and it's ripe for takeover. Not takeover, but for a European
Alliance.
alliance so they can catch up. Because I think Europe are almost resigned to the fact now that it's going to be very difficult for them to catch up with where China are with EVs. So it's all
I didn't know
about
the
trying to do
conversation was going
mergers
here,
and
so I didn't prepare this well, but I remember 1-2 years or maybe a few years already back, the German car makers, there's like two brands for people who are not familiar. There's three brands in Germany. There's the Volkswagen Group, which contains Porsche and Audi. Now Porsche is separate, but they used to be part of the Volkswagen Group. Then there's the Benz Group, Mercedes-Benz. And then there's the BMW Group. So these are the three big independent brands. And they had this proposal where they said, we Germans need to, work together to build a German battery pipeline where we produce the battery packs for our electric cars, and then we can compete on the chassis, on the tech, on the fancy stuff that you see. But the batteries, we need to scale them, and each of us individually is not big enough to get this scale for these big battery manufacturing plants. They couldn't do it. And I think this is a tragedy of Germany nowadays. Germany used to be the capital of the world in terms of engineering capability. Now they cannot build an airport. They needed, 30, 40 years to build the airport in Berlin. It's just, Germany is stuck, and it's sad to see for fans of the German car brands. They still have some edge in some fields. They have good designers. They have some niche technologies, but overall, I find it hard to imagine how they want to catch up again.
Yeah, I think China now are too far. It's quite interesting because I put the video up about that, and I had somebody, obviously a Westerner, commenting that, oh well, all Chinese EVs are a pile of junk. I'm thinking, have you seen them? He obviously hasn't experienced any, because like what I'm seeing, I mean, you mentioned VW earlier, even they're struggling with their EVs. There was something that they're losing, like, I don't know, $20,000 per EV. That's Ford. Sorry, Ford are apparently losing $20,000 to $30,000 per electric vehicle they sell. But I think VW are struggling in the Chinese market because.
I see these VW. Like, I don't want to be anti-branding or anything, but I cannot see why I would look at the VW EVs. I just don't see them.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't see them on the road either.
Yeah, I mean, there's some good, very good Chinese EVs out there. I was at the Shanghai Auto Show like 4 or 5 months ago, and there's just some really cool stuff there. It was mega busy, and it was quite interesting because you walk around, all the EV stands predominantly were Chinese brands, and they were absolutely swamped with people. Then you walk around like the incumbents, like the German and the Europeans and the French, and they were almost empty. There was just nobody looking around them, and it just, what a contrast, because Germany was sort of massive in the car industry just like 5 years ago even, and it's like slid, so it's changing so quickly.
Hasn't China overtaken Germany as the biggest car exporter?
It has,
as well?
Yeah. I think it was Japan, and they overtook Japan as well.
Yeah. Japan and Germany were close. They were always leading by far. And now China is not just the Chinese internal market, but also the export market. That's insane.
Sure, yeah. They're, and the European Union are now rushing to try and, launch investigations to say, and it's so stupid, because I think BYD, I think I mentioned this before, but I'm sure BYD would happily build a plant within Europe, for them to benefit from.
Sure.
Anyway, getting back on track, the thing is that NIO's sales have actually increased, but they're still hemorrhaging a fair bit of money. So I think if it was me and I was the top guy there, I forget his name now, you may remember his name, but if it was me, I think I'd be concentrating on the core business. I think I'd forget about all these sort of fringe things at the moment and concentrate on getting the core business right. It's like Apple, they concentrated on a computer and a phone, and then they turned themselves into a lifestyle brand. And I think, as you alluded to, I think NIO are trying to do it the wrong way around, But I hope they make it,
William just to
that's right. Yeah, yes, that's correct. William Lee Bin. Yeah.
And I remember there was a brand. What was it called? Not Life is Good, but something. There was a brand that did quite successful smart TVs. Then they brought out a smartphone, and then they wanted to build a supercar. It was a Chinese brand. I forget what it was called, like 5 years ago. And they went bankrupt because they did too much at the same time. So that should be a lesson. And I mean, huge respect to William Li for trying to build a Chinese luxury car brand, you know, like in a segment that traditionally was not covered by Chinese brands. I think they're on a good track. You're right. They need to see how they do it. They need to do things that other car brands don't do. Otherwise, they cannot become a luxury brand. That's the thing. You need to do some investment. And we'll see where it goes. I hope to survive. For me, big thing is the battery swap. That's really the thing that makes NIO unique, and that's probably the thing that they should leverage and build upon.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
It's very cool.
Yeah,
it's just,
it really is. Yeah,
the freedom of a gasoline car, because you can change a battery when you don't want to waste time to recharge. But at the same time, you can charge it at home like a phone in the evening, so you don't need to ever go to a gas station.
Well,
so it really
you've
has
got two options, haven't you? You know, you can either charge or you can swap. And actually, they were telling me now they've got pretty good coverage on all the highways now in China of the battery swap stations.
More and more.
It's
and if they manage to convince other brands to use the same standard, that's basically when they win. That's how it would win. Yeah,
that would be